Triambakam yajamahe sugantim pushtivardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanam mrityormukshyamamritat
Hi, this is Amelía Eon Karis.
Hey everyone, it's Satya, and you're listening to Love, Sex and the Hidden Agenda. Hello, it's Satya. I have Amelía here. Hey, Amelía.
Hey, Satya.
So in a previous episode, we asked if we were oversharing. And thank you all for your feedback. We did get some feedback. And actually, a man that we know had said that sometimes the whole truth isn't exactly being presented. And I wanted to talk about that. Amelía, do you have a comment about this?
Yeah, I found his feedback most interesting. So this listener has been listening to our podcast from the beginning. He's a colleague of mine. He's also been doing a lot of healing work with me on my sexual trauma. He's a seer and does shamanic work with me. And he's the person who triggered my whole sex rant too. So we've had an interesting dynamic and have been working through a lot of this healing. And I love his truth telling. So I always count on him to kind of give it to me real and tell me what I'm not seeing, kind of looks in the shadow side. So yeah, he had this really fascinating feedback from me, and I don't know if I'm going to do it justice. Maybe in a future episode, we'll have to have him come on to talk directly.
Oh, cool.
But he was saying that the truth is a little skewed, and that, if I'm sharing from my victim consciousness, that it's not the full truth, right? It's like an skewed perspective and maybe slanted, just for, from my perspective. Obviously I'm not taking into consideration what the man's experience of me was. And then it kind of turns into maybe sounds like man hating or blame or, and so he was he said, yeah, it's not presenting the whole truth. It's like a skewed perspective, and that what pushes and pulls me into the choices that I'm making is confusing. It's like knowing it's bad and yet entertaining it anyway. And is that part of the thrill? And that's what drives the entity. And he said it's not talking about the people who deliberately violated me, but if I was operating from that lower level frequency, that experience probably, if I wasn't operating from the lower frequency, that experience probably wouldn't have happened to me. And so then I wouldn't be repeating that pattern. And I thought that was really profound insight, and one that I don't think I've spoken about here. And, some of the way that I'm sharing the story on the podcast, it's hard to share this story, right? It's dense material, it's dimensional material, and we have 30 minutes, and I'm trying to parse the story down. And if I'm in my pain body, like I was when I did the sex rant or when I shared my date rape diaries, and, I kind of go into the victim consciousness, and I'm very aware of that. And so I just wanted to bring that to light and really thank this person who's been such a huge influence on my healing. And, maybe other listeners are also feeling oh, well, this is just your perspective, and let's get the guy on there and hear from him. In these different circumstances, I think, there's a lot of truth in what he was sharing. So it made me think like, well, let's talk about truth. You know, what is truth? Because truth changes depending on the dimension and the perspective and the frequency in which we're living at, you know, like in our modern day context, you know, everybody has this thing in relationship about like, oh, he's not honest, or feeling betrayed, or the news is fake, or, you know, there's like aspects of truth. And every single individual I have found has a different meter of truth. And I learned this through my relationships, you know, waking up, because truth has always been really important to me. And then I have partners of mine like call me on my shit, like this guy just did, saying like, well, it's not 100% true because it's your perspective. And, you know, and then I'm like, oh, right. And recently there was another situation in my life where I was like, oh, this guy's not being honest to me. And then I realized there was an intelligence behind that and a reason for it. And so I'm being more allowing now in what I'm understanding as truth than what I used to be when I was younger. Does that make sense?
Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
How do you see it?
Truth, I think, truth is the experience and the observation of the experiencer.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our own truth. It's our own reality. It's our own how we're seeing things. So, and I think that what he was saying holds something important for all of us, because when we are speaking from victim consciousness, which we all do at times, we know that even while we're doing it, it doesn't feel right. We know that there's something slightly askew there. Not to deny our reality or our feelings or anything like that, but just that we can always make a little shift or a little adjustment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important to like honor the process you're in. And I was happy that he was honoring, and he knew that I was part of my healing process. So he was giving space for it, even when it hurt him. You know, like my sex rant was against him, basically.
Right.
I was talking to him. And we moved through that, and we're friends now. And, you know, like we were able to repair our relationship and really listen to each other. And that's huge, right? Because that doesn't normally happen. Like if a man has trespassed a female's trust, generally like, you know, castration time, emasculation time, and like, you bad man, right? Mm-hmm. So we had enough of a relationship, and I knew his character enough to know that that he triggered me purposefully. It maybe went too far for me, but it was so needed for my healing. And I think that, you know, I could say that that's true about all of my sexual trauma that I have. Like somehow I needed that trauma, or, you know, when we talk about co-creating our reality, not to condone the behavior, but in those moments of feeling violated, a deeper truth or the next level of truth was revealed to me. And I was able to shift my perspective outside myself from my limited viewpoint to like encompass the bigger design, or the larger truth. And my meditation teacher always said, there's only one truth. There's only one truth. And God, that used to spin me out. I would meditate on it for hours and be like, well, what's the ultimate truth? Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think we all need to be careful, or just understand that, we're all doing the best we have with the skills and the consciousness that level that we're at in trying to be honest, or sharing from this place of like what's true for us in the moment. Doesn't mean it's the ultimate truth. And I hope our listeners know that when they're hearing my story, because I don't share my story to convince anybody that I'm some authority on this. I'm actually doing the opposite. Like, I have tons of questions, very little answers. Every answer I've received has been challenged. So I'm just trying to figure it out, And I know that, when it comes to sexuality in our relationships, like, we're all tripped up here. I mean, this is like the crux of issues in the world, right?
Yeah. And I mean, one thing that's coming to me right now is just, it may sound cliche or whatnot, but if we're asking the ultimate truth, I guess we could say, well, it's love. Love is the ultimate truth. Once you move through everything else and pull back all the layers and go through the fear and all of that, it still comes back to love is the ultimate. So I had a point there. Let me try to get it back. But what were you just going to say?
Yeah. And I think it's important that we don't bypass the process, and I think a lot of light workers or other therapists, anyone who's awakened and starts to see the ultimate truth and then finds themselves back in victim consciousness, right? Because it's a loop. It's not like we, as long as we're here in this body and this density, we are going to move through all these levels over and over again. It's not like, we just get a free pass out of all pain and suffering and never have to experience it again. But we think we should have that when we've obtained certain levels, like I had, I think all of us here have had those experiences of transcendental bliss. And then it's like, when you feel bad again, it's like, how'd this come back? And so we often try to bypass to the solution to get to the ultimate truth and not really go through what our human emotional body is needing to process, like pain or grief or sadness or despair. And like, we still have to go through that.
Right. Yeah, so it's like our ultimate, it is very tricky. I mean, our ultimate intention when we're going through things, even if we're angry, it's like if you get angry at your partner and you're, yelling or something, I mean, maybe the intention inside is just, I want to be closer to you. I need to connect with you deeper. I mean, so that is an important part. And also just loving whatever comes up. So I guess when I say the ultimate truth is love, is even loving those times when we're in victim consciousness or we feel like a victim, or we feel like it's, we can still love those aspects of ourselves that go in and out of maybe dark places or whatnot. So
important. That's critical. I mean, and I think that's what I'm aiming to do in sharing this. And it's scary because it's all live and recorded and people can listen, and strangers and people that maybe I don't want to listen can listen. And I'm like, oh, this is super vulnerable. Like it's not all perfect. Like I haven't figured it out. I'm not wearing my teacher hat in this podcast, and it's just been interesting since we started the podcast. I've really stepped back from teaching. And I've been going through this level of a process of leveling up to the next level to really clear some of these deeper wounds so that I can, bring more light into my body, to embody it, to embody more bliss, to feel more pleasure, to feel more wholeness, to feel more love. And so I'm in the excavation space, and I wanted to create this like raw, safe place for me to do that, in hopes that, in me doing it, it'll, I don't know, create the invitation, I guess it is, for you, for Joe, for everyone listening, to explore, because it's scary stuff. Like where everything hides,
Yeah. What did so when did this bring up anything for you, do you think, like patterns or reflecting on things in the past or your childhood, or it did?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it makes me think about how, truth has been the torch that I've been carrying since I was really young. In my family, my parents were married for 25 years. They divorced when I was 16, but their marriage started really falling apart when I was like 14. And, I was just moving through puberty and watching my dad have an affair for a number of years before my mom found out and dissolved the marriage. So they had a horrible marriage. It was completely void of affection and love and companionship. It was like two different ships sailing in different directions, very different personalities, very different parenting styles. They were not a team. But they were technically married and we lived under one roof, although I never really saw them together. When my dad had this affair, I couldn't understand how my mom was so clueless. Like when she came to know, I had already known my dad's girlfriend, walked in on them having sex, seen her at the house, like I knew the whole story, was picking up every time she called, because we had, it was before people had mobile phones. So, she would call the house, and there was 5 phones in our house. We had a very large home, and I would pick it up exactly when my dad picked up. So nobody would know I was on the line listening. And I would hear their conversations, and I would just be quiet and then gently close it. And she would always be like, "Can you talk? Are you alone?" And this sexy voice. And, I was just going through puberty, but I was watching this, and it really formed my opinions about men, like men cheat or men need a certain level of sexuality. And around my mother, this disgust about her blindness. Like, how could she be so blind to this obvious, deception going on? Like her level of checking out of presence. So for me, it was like that. I made a kind of vow to myself, like, that's never going to be me. I'm never going to be my mom. I'm never going to be blind to this level of play out or blindsided or be with someone who thinks that they have to lie to me. So, my first marriage was with a guy who was my best friend. I wasn't attracted to him. And then, I knew he was a player and had this like desire for a lot of women. And I was the first woman. I found out a year into our relationship that I'm the first woman he'd ever had sex with more than 3 times. And I found out that his sexual history was like crazy amount of people. And he was only 26, and it freaked me out. And so I created this like way of coping with the situation, which was to kind of open the relationship and allow him to be with other women. And, that was, our whole relationship was so different. It wasn't at all a traditional marriage by any stretch of the imagination. And so, I've been reflecting on like, wow, truth was so important to me that I like sacrificed all these other needs that I had, like for being satisfied myself sexually, or for having a level of love and connection that I needed, just for honesty. Like I preferred because he told me the truth. Like he had no problem talking about his crazy perversions and kinks and what his needs were. And I was fine to make them happen because I had this like panic that I would be like blindsided, or I just didn't want to look like my mom, how my mom looked to me.
Right.
And since then, you know, that was a very long time ago. And I've been in all kinds of relationships since, and different levels of honesty. And I think that more in the last like decade, I've started to sit with like, oh, maybe it's, you know, not so bad. Like, we don't have to tell our truth to everyone. Like, personally, I want to be transparent,
Right.
but
Me too.
but I see that like not everyone can handle the truth.
People don't like it. People don't like it.
No, and it creates a big problem, and it outcasts you if you're a truth teller.
Yep.
And so I think that a lot of good people are strategically omitting the truth.
Yep.
Let's call it. Maybe they're not directly lying, but little white lies and little, you know, when I lived in India, that culture lies a lot. And I was always shocked and like appalled by it. Like, everyone's a liar. And, you know, like everyone, you know, like, why do they lie about the stupidest things? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, they're lying about like, hey, will you come tomorrow at 8? Yeah, madam, I'll be there. And then they show up at like, they have no intention of even coming the next day.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like this incongruency between the words and the feelings, and confusing me so much, because I really need congruency. I need people's words to match what I'm feeling from them, but most people's don't. And after 8 years in India, you know, I started to understand their white lies, their little, what they call white lies. They're just lies to make you feel good. Like, there is actually like a good reason behind it. And they're like, no, but we don't want to see you frown. We don't want to see that. I'm like, I just want the truth. It doesn't matter what I feel. Like, let me deal with my own feelings. You don't need to manage my feelings. You know, just tell me the goddamn truth.
Oh my God. I don't know why, but this is just like really hitting me. I spent some time in India, but I didn't even realize this. Like, I didn't spend enough time there to really know this, but that is hilarious. So there they are, you know, their intention is love. Meanwhile, it's, you know, making you miserable, making you feel terrible, which it would anyone. Because then it sets you up, you have expectations, and then, you know, nobody's showing up or whatever, but still just, so there you go, you know, different perspectives on what, you know, what kind of lies are okay and what aren't. I mean, the one truth is that people lie. I mean, they all have their ways of lying. Everyone does.
Oh yeah, it's huge. And I think, you know, one thing I noticed about India was that they don't have the Bible. You know, I mean, of course there are Christians, but they're all converted Hindus or Muslims that have become Christian. Yeah, Christianity is quite new in India. So they don't have, the majority of people didn't grow up with lies being a deadly sin, like in the US. Like, lying in the US is so shameful, right?
Oh, it's so shameful. And yet, you know, all the studies show that basically 99.9% of people lie. And most people don't even know they're lying when they're lying. Most people, because we've fragmented and we've disowned that part of ourselves to such a degree, because it's bad in our culture, that we will go straight into denial. It's almost like blackout on what, you know, what we're even lying about. People just disown that whole piece of themselves.
Oh yeah, in India, none of the things I'm talking about were considered lying. Lying is completely an acceptable way of communicating. It's like, it's embedded into like the daily conversation. And it drove me nuts. But after a while, I started realizing like, oh, well, once you understand the game, it's easier to navigate. Yeah, the level of denial in India was so thick. And yet after 8 years and being in, you know, an interesting relationship dynamic, for 5 years, which I'm not going to get into because we need to wrap up maybe for another episode. I started to learn that like telling the truth, one of the Indian gurus I worked with there, he said, tell the truth intelligently, because apparently my truth telling in India was way too direct. Like way, they found it abrasive and terrifying. Like nobody wanted to hear the truth. Nobody did. And yet I love when people are honest to me, especially my partners, and especially when it's a truth that they don't want to tell me. Like, oh, I'm attracted to another woman. Oh, this happened. I'm so sorry. Like I somehow fall in love with people when they can just say it as it is.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Especially from what you had experienced through your childhood. Like you need that honesty.
I do, but clearly not everyone does. Like for some people, that level of honesty is so disruptive to their to maintaining their daily life that they would rather not hear it.
Right. Many people's lives, entire lives, are lived around lies.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, you know, who am I to say that that's not okay? Like, I'm not here to like be the ethical police.
Well, right, because we don't know what the intention is, or where their hearts are, or what their reasons are. Yeah. So.
Yeah, big learning there. So anyway, I'm learning about levels of truth and just honoring my own needs around it. And also honoring, you know, other people's. And for those of you guys listening who are in relationships and honesty and truth are important to you, like try to define and get clear about what kind of truth is important to you, like how much truth, and where in your life are you being dishonest? Because I had to look in that mirror really heavy and found that there were a ton of things I was being dishonest about, even though I was such this like truth teller. And that's part of why I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah. And if any of you have a story you want to share around this, we would be interested.
Yes, absolutely. Please send it in. You can reach us on our website, lovesexagenda.com, and on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Love Sex Agenda. Thanks for listening today.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us. If you'd like to contact us and stay in touch with us, you can find us at lovesexagenda.com. That's lovesexagenda.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, Love, Sex, and the Hidden Agenda. Dia